since you signed on to make this movie.
2 years this month since I last sat in this lovely chair and talked to you.
And at that time,
The last time I went to Disney, it was her birthday on Thursday, so today felt like a little celebration. But for Rachel Zegler, there's been little to celebrate lately. Once hailed as one of Hollywood's brightest young stars, her career has suffered a dramatic fall from grace following the disastrous release of Disney's Snow White remake. What was meant to be her defining role has instead become synonymous with one of the biggest box office flops in the studio's history in the aftermath of the backlash. Reports suggest Zegler retreated to New York City, where she was seen taking ordinary subway rides in an apparent effort to go unnoticed. The stark image of a once red carpet regular blending in with everyday commuters became a striking metaphor for how swiftly fame can fade in Hollywood. The Snow White remake itself turned into a full-scale catastrophe. Social media was soon flooded with photos and videos of empty theaters, with viewers mocking Disney for producing a film no one seemed to care about. Within just 4 weeks, more than half of its scheduled showings were pulled as theaters scrambled to make room for titles that could actually fill seats. The numbers told a brutal truth. The movie plummeted 66% in its second weekend alone, devastating Disney's financial expectations. With an estimated $250 million production budget before marketing, it managed to scrape together only $143 million worldwide. Critics were equally harsh, leaving the film languishing at a dismal 6 out of 10 on IMDb. The humiliation only deepened when a TikTok user went viral for recording herself as the only person in a Snow White screening. The clip became the ultimate symbol of the film's failure. By mid-April 2025, theater chains began canceling showings altogether. Some sessions sold as few as 3 tickets, while others barely earned $50 in a day. Unable to justify keeping an empty title on their schedules, theater owners shifted focus to upcoming blockbusters like Minecraft and Captain America. Brave New World, films that were drawing the crowds Disney could now only dream of. Even internationally, the studio's troubles showed no signs of slowing down in China. Where Disney had launched an aggressive marketing campaign, audiences simply didn't turn up. Despite posters covering buses, buildings, and even apartment complexes, videos emerged online showing completely empty IMAX screenings. One Shanghai journalist described attending a showing with just 5 people present: himself, a friend, and 3 others scattered across the massive theater. Rather than saving the film's reputation, these stories only cemented its image as a monumental failure. Rachel Zegler unintentionally made matters worse. In a misguided attempt to regain control of the narrative, she posted a TikTok video of herself sitting alone in a nearly empty cinema, seemingly trying to turn the situation into a lighthearted viral moment. The move backfired spectacularly. Instead of appearing self-aware, she was accused of mocking the very audiences she had already alienated during the press tour. Her earlier remarks about Snow White and her outspoken political opinions had already stirred significant backlash, with insiders now describing her as a high-risk talent that studios are wary of hiring. Reports of emotional breakdowns and difficult behavior on set only deepened concerns, reinforcing the impression of a rising star watching her career slip through her fingers. Behind the scenes, the fallout went far beyond one actress. Industry analysts suggest that Zegler's conduct, combined with the catastrophic reception of Snow White, has forced Disney to rethink its entire lineup of so-called woke live-action remakes. Already struggling with a string of underperforming releases, the studio has been left nursing a very public and costly embarrassment. Initial forecasts predicted losses around $115 million, but with the global gross barely reaching $195 million, that figure has since ballooned to an estimated $145 million. For a company once synonymous with guaranteed box office success, the failure is more than just financial. It's a devastating blow to Disney's image, and a stark reminder that even the most powerful brands aren't immune to audience fatigue. Even more troubling is that the collapse of Snow White may mark the beginning of a much larger unraveling within Disney's creative strategy, the once profitable formula of remaking its animated classics in live-action form. While earlier projects like The Lion King and Aladdin enjoyed commercial success, recent remakes have struggled to capture the same magic. The failure of Snow White has intensified public calls for Disney to abandon its over-reliance on nostalgia and return to crafting original, imaginative stories. What was once seen as a safe, lucrative model has now become a symbol of creative stagnation. This wasn't just a box office disappointment, It was a referendum on Disney's entire direction. The company's leadership has found itself in increasingly uncomfortable positions. In a recent interview, CEO Bob Iger was questioned about accusations that Disney had become too woke. His response only deepened the sense of uncertainty, admitting that he no longer even knows what the term means. Iger insisted that Disney's mission remains to entertain and make a positive impact. Yet his comments did little to reassure disillusioned fans or anxious shareholders worried about the brand's cultural and financial trajectory. For Rachel Zegler, the fallout has been even more personal and severe. Once positioned as one of Hollywood's most promising young talents, she now finds her name tied to one of the industry's most notorious modern flops. Studios are reportedly reconsidering her involvement in upcoming projects, wary of both the public backlash and the potential financial losses that could follow her participation. What was meant to be a defining moment in her career has instead transformed into a cautionary tale. A stark reminder of how quickly fame, fortune, and goodwill can vanish in an industry that rarely forgives high-profile failure. In the end, the Snow White fiasco became far more than just a failed film. It evolved into a defining symbol of an industry at a crossroads. The disaster exposed the fragility of Disney's dependence on nostalgia, the dangers of alienating core audiences, and the volatile nature of celebrity culture in the age of social media. For Rachel Zegler, it may represent the abrupt end of what was once a meteoric rise. For Disney, however, it could serve as the long-overdue wake-up call, forcing the company to reassess the very foundation of its modern creative strategy. Addressing the growing controversy around Disney's direction, CEO Bob Iger recently admitted in an interview that he no longer fully understands how the word woke is being used in modern discourse. He emphasized that Disney's mission has always been to entertain first, striving to do so responsibly and with a positive impact, but made it clear that storytelling remains at the heart of the brand. Yet, despite his reassurances, the company's actions tell a different story. In the aftermath of Snow White's catastrophic performance, Disney quietly pulled the brakes on its next major live-action project. According to Tangled insiders, the studio had been gearing up for what insiders described as its most ambitious remake to date, with a budget even larger than Snow White's. But following the financial losses and unrelenting public backlash, production was abruptly halted. It was a decisive signal that the very strategy Disney had staked its future on was beginning to crumble. Zegler's involvement only deepened the crisis. Even before Snow White officially collapsed at the box office, reports suggested that Disney executives were growing increasingly uneasy about her controversial public image. What had once seemed like a perfect partnership between a rising star and a powerful studio has now become a shared cautionary tale. One about overconfidence, misjudged branding, and the steep price of losing touch with the audience that once made Disney magic untouchable. By openly mocking the very foundation of the Snow White story, Rachel Zegler managed to alienate the very audience Disney depended on, its loyal, multi-generational fan base. Her interpretation of the character was reimagined as a fiercely independent woman with no need for romance or a prince, a deliberate departure from the classic fairy tale formula that had defined Disney for nearly a century. While Zegler defended the creative shift as a modern and progressive update, the decision proved deeply divisive. It reportedly split Disney executives, frustrated her co-stars, and infuriated audiences around the world. The end result was a film and a performance that captured neither the charm of the original nor the approval of contemporary viewers. In contrast, her co-star Andrew Burnap was said to have thrown himself wholeheartedly into his role, doing everything he could to steady a production that was already collapsing under the weight of controversy, yet his efforts were overshadowed by the intense backlash directed at Zegler and the studio's creative choices. The scale of the fallout has made it clear that Snow White's implosion is no longer just about one failed movie. It has come to symbolize the broader collapse of Disney's live-action remake strategy, a model once viewed as a billion-dollar cornerstone of its cinematic future. With more than 200 theaters dropping the film, global box office losses soaring into the hundreds of millions, and even insiders admitting that several planned remakes may now be shelved. The once lucrative formula has turned toxic almost overnight. Zegler's interviews, her polarizing political comments, and her behind-the-scenes reputation have done more than damage a single project. They may have forced Disney to confront the unsustainable direction of its entire creative approach. What began as one actress's ill-fated press tour has spiraled into a company-wide reckoning, exposing just how fragile even the mightiest empire can be when it loses sight of the audience it was built to entertain. As Rachel Zegler's reputation continues to deteriorate and major studios quietly distance themselves from her, her once promising future in Hollywood now appears more uncertain than ever. Instead of being remembered as the actress who helped usher in Disney's next great era, Zegler has become synonymous with one of the company's most infamous failures. For Disney, the Snow White remake will not be recalled as another triumphant reimagining of a beloved classic, but as a stark warning, a case study in what happens when a studio loses touch with its audience and when an actor's words eclipse their performance. The numbers alone told a devastating story. Theater owners, unable to justify keeping Snow White on their screens, began cutting showings as attendance collapsed. In some locations, entire screenings sold no more than 3 tickets, with daily box office averages sinking to around $53, an almost unthinkable outcome for a film that had cost hundreds of millions to produce and promote. This wasn't just a disappointing release, it was a full-scale implosion. What made the blow even more painful for Disney was the growing realization that the film's failure was self-inflicted. By stripping away the central romance, reshaping character motivations, and reworking a cherished fairy tale into something almost unrecognizable, the studio had gambled on a modernized vision of Snow White and lost. In trying to reinvent a timeless story for a new generation, Disney ended up alienating both its loyal fans and the wider audience it hoped to inspire, leaving behind a project that will be remembered less for its ambition and more for its downfall. Industry analysts have since picked apart the Snow White debacle, identifying not only the film's creative missteps, but also the damage caused by Rachel Zegler's divisive behavior during its promotional run. Her remarks dismissing the original 1937 story as outdated and problematic may have been intended to sound progressive, yet they backfired spectacularly. Instead of sparking meaningful discussion, they alienated loyal Disney fans and deepened public resentment. The studio ultimately delivered a product that pleased no one, a reimagining that failed to capture new audiences while offending the very supporters who had sustained the Disney legacy for generations. The financial fallout has been equally brutal. Losses are now projected to exceed $145 million, placing Snow White among the most expensive failures in recent Hollywood history. To put that in perspective, the money spent on this one ill-fated production could have funded several mid-budget original films, any of which might have stood a far better chance of connecting with viewers. The misfire has sent shockwaves throughout Disney's leadership, forcing a reckoning that can no longer be ignored. One of the most telling signs of this shift came with the quiet cancellation of the planned live-action Tangled, which insiders say was set to become the company's most expensive remake yet. The decision signaled that executives are finally rethinking their reliance on nostalgia-driven, live-action reboots, a strategy once considered foolproof after billion-dollar hits like The Lion King and Aladdin, but now revealed to be alarmingly fragile. At the center of this storm stands Rachel Zegler, whose meteoric rise has unraveled in dramatic fashion. What was meant to be her crowning achievement has instead transformed into a cautionary tale. Not just for her career, but for an entire studio that bet too heavily on the past while failing to understand the audience of the present. Not long ago, Rachel Zegler was celebrated as one of Hollywood's most promising young talents, earning widespread acclaim for her breakout role in West Side Story. But that early promise has quickly given way to uncertainty. Insiders now say major studios are increasingly reluctant to cast her in high-profile projects, wary of the controversies that seem to follow her. Her tendency to go off-script during press tours and reports of tense relationships with co-stars have raised concerns about her professionalism and reliability. Behind the scenes, whispers of controlling behavior on set and a perceived disregard for the source material have only deepened industry skepticism. What was once viewed as youthful confidence and creative boldness is now being interpreted as arrogance and unpredictability. In a business built on reputation and collaboration, Zegler's has taken a damaging turn, leaving her seen, less as a rising star and more as a risk few studios are willing to take. Rachel. Zegler's professional freefall is all the more striking when set against the success of other films, released in the same period. While Snow White struggled to fill even a fraction of theater seats, audiences eagerly turned out for faithful adaptations and fresh original stories. Families who might once have treated a Disney remake as a major event instead stayed away in droves, leaving behind rows of empty seats, images that soon became viral punchlines across social media. For Disney, the implications stretch far beyond one film or one actress. If the failure of Snow White reflects a broader shift in audience tastes, then the studio's billion-dollar remake strategy may be nearing its end. Once considered a guaranteed moneymaker, the formula now appears fragile and outdated. Earlier live-action reimaginings brought staggering profits, but this collapse has revealed just how vulnerable even Disney's most iconic intellectual property can be when mishandled. The brand that once embodied magic, trust, and consistency now faces a sobering reckoning. As for Rachel Zegler, her future in Hollywood looks more uncertain than ever. Comebacks in the industry are possible, but rarely after a failure this public, this polarizing, and this steeped in controversy. Her challenges go beyond box office numbers. She faces a serious perception problem. Mocking beloved source material, clashing with co-stars, and alienating audiences have left scars that will not easily fade. What was meant to be her defining role has instead become a career-altering cautionary tale. And for Disney, Snow White has become more than a financial misstep. It stands as a powerful reminder that even the world's most dominant studio can falter when it forgets what made its stories timeless to begin with: heart, humility, and the ability to connect with audiences on a human level